Okay, so it is week 8. We are back from our extended reading week. Wow, that's crazy a deal. That's so we've been looking at Type Racer, working on our typing skills a little bit, and we're sort of in the range between, 40, 50, 60 words per minute have been some of the speeds. So let's have a look at our plan for today. I want to go over just quickly the revisions to the course schedule due to the extra week of reading week. I'll review both the midterm exam, and then I also want to address some of the feedback. Really appreciate all the very thoughtful feedback I got in the survey. So thank you for everybody who did that. So there were a number of, I don't just read those comments and ignore them. I want to address some of them because I think there was some really useful feedback in there. So I will talk about that feedback and sort of my response and some of the things that I will try to do in response to some of the suggestions, very helpful suggestions that the different people in the class made. Then we're going to go back to our Lamp Food site. We're going to look at building shared site components. So how do we build things like a header and footer that are shared across the pages of the site? That also allows us to reduce duplication in our code. So we'll want to, for example, take our database connection that we've repeated on a whole bunch of pages. We're going to want to move that into a single file that can be shared throughout the application for scalability. And then we'll also briefly look at error handling in PHP. None of these things are terribly complicated. They are fairly simple, but some useful tools for us to know. Okay, and we'll also look at creating a navigation bar using a Bootstrap navbar component, and we'll maybe customize it a little bit. Okay, I'm actually going to start with the second item first. So I have posted a revised syllabus to D2L. So it's under course information. It's our syllabus revised. So the original syllabus is still here, but I'll go over the revision. Yeah, Megan, that definitely makes a big difference as well when you don't have to look at the keyboard for sure, but it takes practice to be able to do that for sure. So really all I've changed on the syllabus is I've pushed back the weeks. So we now have our semester, our last class was supposed to be the week of April 5th. It's now going to be Tuesday, April 13th will be our final class. And our exam was originally scheduled for Thursday, the 15th. So I will have to confirm what the exam date is. I'm not sure if it's just simply been moved back a week or if it's been rescheduled entirely. So I will update the class as soon as I find out that date. Okay, so everything else we've just moved back a week. Okay, so you can find that again under course information. So in terms of the midterm, overall the midterms were good. The class average was 80, which was quite high, typically higher than on an exam. I also just wanted to show a quick sample of what the practical solution would look like. And this is one of the things people were asking for, was being able to see answers and solutions. So Chris has been generous enough. Thanks, Chris, for letting me show your solution. And I'll also just show the code quickly. So this is basically all you needed to do for your 10 marks. So the first page should have a drop down list that selected the 4 cuisines from the cuisines table. And apologies, Mason, if you're here, I apologize. I'll never use the word cuisine again because he said lots of typo issues with it. So then I pick a cuisine and I do the same thing. I click Get Foods, and I simply get a list showing the foods that only belong to the cuisine that I selected. I pick Mexican, I get Mexican food. I pick Indian, I get Indian dishes. That didn't occur to me. I apologize. Danish, I get Danish dishes. So we'll quickly have a look at the code from Chris's sample. So the select cuisine page, most people did pretty well with this one. So Chris created a dropdown. One of the problems that a few people had was either they didn't give a name property to their select box, which meant on the next page it was impossible to read the user's choice, or the name that they referred to it here didn't match the name on the next page. So Chris did his database connection, ran a simple query called fetch all, and then looped through and generate an option tag for each individual record, where the value was the primary key field, and then the text was the name property. Yep, that definitely helps, Megan, for sure. The exam marks, yeah, the exam marks have been up, I think, for at least a week. I believed I marked all the exams March 2nd and March 3rd. You can't see the marks? Okay, I apologize. I wasn't aware of that. Bear with me. I can do that right now. So just going back to Chris's solution, you need to click into it. The feedback should be in there on that specific question. The deal. The feedback's not attached to the quiz as a whole. It's attached to your to the actual question number. So on the foods page, we're reading in. Oh, whoops, this is my page, but get the idea. We're reading in the value of the selected in the drop-down list. And then we're selecting the foods, but our foods needs a where clause. We don't want all the foods in the foods table. We only want, and this was my version of the page, but very similar to Chris's page, but we need to filter for the selected cuisine. Instead of showing all 12 foods in the foods table, we're only selecting the 3. And then we need to fill the cuisine ID parameter, and then loop through the data and display our table. So thanks, Chris, for letting me do the demo. I guess I mixed up your page and mine, but they were basically the same. Okay, Bree. So you can see the mark. Oh, maybe. Hang on a second. Let me change there. I'll remove the end date. Can you refresh it and let me know if you can see it now? There's no end date on the availability anymore. Okay, I will have to figure out what changes I need to make to it. When you click on read feedback, it takes you Oh, hang on. We'll see if this allows you into it. I said, show the question answers. It doesn't give me the option about the feedback. So try one more time. If not, I'll look at it after class. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Sorry for the pain for that. So I want to talk about a number of items that people mentioned in the survey. Okay. So in some cases, I got some contradictory feedback. So not necessarily lots I can do about that, but figured I would just bring it to your attention. So one of the comments that I saw several places was I got mixed feedback about breakout rooms. Some students really liked them and actually said, you want more work in breakout rooms because it helps create that interaction. Other people felt the breakout rooms, there wasn't a lot of point in doing them because they were often in breakout rooms where no one was actually communicating. So I have to think about what to do about that. In general, I think using the breakout room some is a good idea. We have a big class, we're fully online, just so that we have some sense of getting a chance to talk to each other a little bit. Yeah, Mason, that's not a bad idea. I could look at doing a survey about that. True. That's a good suggestion. Several people talked about extra practice, extra resources. So, I do the stuff in class, but I don't know where to go if I want to do more practice. So I do have a couple of resources around this. So in weekly learning, under links, tools, and resources, and I've had this here since the beginning of the course, and I think I just forgot to mention it to you. There is an optional ungraded project spec here. This last item here that says optional project. So this isn't something you would do for grades, but something you could practice, and you could do it on your own. You could do it with classmates, and you can do as little or as much of this as you like. So the application is to build an online time tracker so that a company could use for their employees or contractors to log daily what work they were doing and for which clients. And then you'd be able to both invoice your client as well as generate payroll based on these timesheets. The whole site should be private, and you'd have the ability to add, edit, and delete clients, add, edit, and delete projects, and have a relationship that every project has to belong to a client. So when you're adding a project, there should be a client dropdown. And each project would also have a billing rate. You'd then be able to add, edit, delete timesheets. Timesheets need a date, a client, a project, a phase, a description, and the number of hours worked. You could add the ability to search timesheets by client, project, date. Make sure you're validating all your inputs, error handling, CSS. So this is a project you could work on for practice if you are interested in having something else to do. Mason, I'll come back to your link in a moment. The other place that I would recommend if you want additional resources, and I don't know if you can log in with your Lakehead accounts, but you can definitely log in with your Georgian accounts, is LinkedIn Learning. Have any of you used LinkedIn Learning at all before? Okay, you used it for Java. Yeah, it used to be lynda.com. So it was lynda.com, LinkedIn, which is now owned by Microsoft, bought it. They've rebranded it LinkedIn Learning. There are tons of great resources on here. So these things would complement what we're doing in class. So under PHP, there's 3,000 results, 2,800 videos, and 86 courses. And some of this stuff covers things we're doing in class, but some of the more advanced courses will cover other things. Like well, this one's a little bit older. Yeah, so this is actually where I go when to update my own knowledge. If technology is changing in a course I'm going to be teaching, or when I'm teaching a new course, like I started teaching Android, I didn't know the first thing about Android. So I basically did as many LinkedIn courses on Android development as I possibly could.
Oh, that's I'm carry on the coach.
I think somebody's got their mic on. Okay, so LinkedIn Learning, it's free for you. You can just sign in with your Georgian account. Normally it's a paid service, but a great place to go, not only for this course, for any of your courses, if you're looking for extra material. Okay, well, let's look at Mason's poll here. I don't know that I'm necessarily willing to get rid of them entirely. Because I do think they have their use. And we got 40 students in the class, but only 9 votes. So if overwhelmingly people aren't in favor of them, I'll be sure to be somewhat judicious with their use. But in terms of getting rid of them entirely, I think there's still some useful activities that I want to do in them that we can't really do in a group of 35, 40 students. Okay, one of the other things that was mentioned by several people was they said they'd like to be able to see the files from each lesson separately, because we're just kind of incrementally adding on to our LAMP food site. You can actually break out the files this way through the project GitHub repository. So when you come to the repository, yes, you see all the files, but if you go into the commit, so here where it says 7 commits, let's say you miss lesson 4, or you want to look at the files just in lesson 4. I've put the lesson and the number, and with my descriptive commit messages. So if you want to see the files as they were at the end of lesson 4, this says browse the repository at this point in the history. So this shows you where the project was at the end of lesson 4. And it also shows you, if you want to see, for example, the changes, you can actually click and it will show you what files were changed and what got added or removed. So years ago when I taught this course, I used to, every class, we'd create a folder, a local folder for that week, and we'd start class by copying the previous week's folder. And students found that really confusing and unwieldy to have like 12 different versions on their computer. So by using Git, we don't really have to. So if you want to go back and see any previous version of the code, just view it through the commits link on GitHub. And I think that should hopefully address that concern. The most common comment people mentioned was that you couldn't see the feedback from the quizzes when you were finished with them. That was an oversight on my part. I assumed you were able to, that D2L, that it did it. I didn't realize that the default is that you can't see your quiz answers and questions. So I've updated all the future quizzes now. So you'll be able to see the full quiz, all the answers, what your answer was, what the correct answer was in the feedback. You'll be able to see that immediately as you finish each quiz. So in Blackboard for the Georgian courses, it does that automatically. I didn't realize that that I had to toggle that for each quiz in D2L. So thank you for letting me know. If that's still a problem, let me know, but it should work correctly moving forward. Few people asked about having some additional challenges, saying, so, you know, sometimes, hey, I finished stuff early. I will try to bake some additional challenges into some of the in-class coding tasks, but also feel free to ask me. If I don't have one ready and you're done, you can send me a message in the chat and say, hey, what else can I do with this while people are still working on it? And I can always find something else that you can try to challenge yourself. The last comment had to do with pace of the class. This one also, I got a little bit, I get different feedback. I got some people saying the class is a bit too fast, some people saying the class is a bit too slow. Obviously, I'm doing my best to not leave everybody behind, but also not keep anybody bored. But people do learn, type, and have internet connections at different speeds. So if I'm getting some too fast, some too slow, that's an indication I may be somewhere in the right spot. Again, but you can please let me know in the chat during the class if the lesson is really moving slow and lots of people are telling me that, or vice versa, that I'm going too fast and lots of people are getting left behind. Please don't hesitate to use the chat and ask me to pause or go back to something. Okay, that's fine, but it's easier for me to tell when we're in a classroom and I can see your faces and see whether you're coding or not. A little harder for me to get a sense of how the pace is working for you in an online environment. So please communicate and let me know. Okay, well, Mason, thanks for throwing up the poll. I appreciate, and I'll be mindful of what people are asking here. As I said, I don't know, I'll dispense with them entirely, but I'll try to be judicious in their use based on this feedback. Okay, well, that's useful to know, Ivan. And I mean, the other thing is, don't forget, you do also have the videos. So you do have the ability to go back and watch again anything that maybe you miss or get stuck on. Okay, so we've dealt with this stuff. So I want to talk a little bit about reusing code and modularizing our code. I've connected to the VPN, so make sure you get connected. Let's get our site launched. So if you haven't already, connect to the VPN, start up your web server, and let's open up our lamp food project in our code editor. And it's been a little while. It's been a few weeks since we've worked with this because we had 2 weeks off. We had our exam. So it's actually been 3 weeks, 4 weeks since we've done anything with this. So this is where we left off. We could now add, edit, delete, and we also included our categories in our list. So we could link either that way or with our edit. So what we want to do now is we need to start to modularize this. And what I mean, if you think back to our very first class, We looked at several websites. We looked at, I think, the Globe and Mail, and we looked at Amazon, and we looked at Facebook. And one of the first conversations we had was, I said, as I scroll from the top of this page to the bottom, what things are static and what's dynamic? Anybody remember what kind of our general answer to that was? What elements on Globe and Mail homepage are static and what elements are dynamic? What changes and what doesn't?
The headers, the navigation, all that stays static. The footer stays static, and then the content is the dynamic part.
Right. So basically, we've got a shared header, shared footer, and then all the content, as Adil mentioned, the articles, as well as all the other content, the images, the ads, the links, everything else inside basically is dynamic. But we really want one header. Why do we want to have one header and one footer as opposed to having a header and footer on every page?
To change if you have to make a difference later on.
Yeah, just for scalability. Thanks, Jeremy. And yeah, it can also be confusing, right? If we've got 1,000 pages in the site and we have to change the header, we don't have to go into 1,000 pages and change it. We want it in one location. So we need to be thinking about where can we make our code modular? Where can we reuse pieces? Yep, so a global navigation helps in not repeating the code. Yeah, so virtually every site has one header and one footer, and those are shared. It also makes it easier to debug. If there's a problem in the header, we only have to go into one file and change it. Okay? And if we want to add new pages, there's a lot less work. We don't have to go and add the full header to each one. Okay? So as much as possible, we don't want to repeat ourselves when we're coding. So a shared header we can make, a shared footer we can make, like most other sites. Is there anything else you can think of in our current application that we've repeated in a bunch of places that it would be easier to maintain our code if we could move that to a single file? You click through the pages in code editor. Yeah, the database connection is a big one. Okay? So we always want to have a single database connection that we just share. And we kind of link to it the same way we would link to a style sheet, right? We don't duplicate the same styles on page after page or replicate them. Also, our database connection, we may have to change it, right? Our site gets hacked or compromised or someone on our team leaves, so we need to update the database password. We don't want to go into every page in the site and change the password. We just want to go into one file or remove hosts. So the server address changes. Again, we want that database connection to be in one place. And we might also have, so not only visual components, things like database connectivity. Show you another quick example. We might also write reusable functions. So for example, this site, let's see. This is just all test data. So here I have an HTML table of data, and I've got this export to Excel function. So this is just a generic function that's going to copy this table and render it out as an Excel file. So here it's exported with the headers. So I may want to reuse this function on different sections of the site. I might want to be able to export any search results. So the most effective way to do this is write a global export to Excel function and then just share it on any pages that need it, rather than repeating that code again and again. So sometimes we're reusing visible components. Sometimes it's actual code where there is nothing visible, nothing for the end user to see. So we've got a couple basic functions in PHP. And in looking around and thinking, when I marked everyone's assignment one, a few students in the class already sort of discovered what some of those functions are. So there's actually 4 different functions we could use. I'll just maybe add to D2L here. Can anybody tell the class, what's one of the 4 functions? So if we wanted to make a header file or a database connection file, okay, so we've got include. Yep. Thanks, Hannah. There's 3 other kind of variations of include. Thanks, Ivan. We've got include once. Yep. So those are 2 of the 4. Not include all, but good guess, Ivan. Thanks, Chris. We've got require. And there's 1 other version. Thank you, Hannah. And require once. So what are the differences? These all basically work the same way, but there's subtle differences. So let's talk about include and require. Both will let us link to an external file or embed an external file. How are they different? The end user doesn't know the difference. They mostly do the same thing, but not exactly.
Does require stop on execution if it isn't there?
You got it. Okay, so if file missing, include throws a warning, require throws an error. And what about the difference between include and include once, or require and require once? If you need to search online for an answer, search online for an answer. I'm patient. I can wait for an answer.
So essentially, including once only includes the particular file one time. It doesn't include it over again if it reruns.
Correct. So it determines how many times a file can be embedded. Now, rarely are we going to want to embed the same file multiple times in another page. So which of these you use for our purposes in this course doesn't really matter. But you should know the differences between them, because they're similar, but these functions are not exactly the same. Okay, so let's play around with this. Let's do a really simple example. So I'm going to make a new PHP file, and I'll call it page1.php. I'll make my page title, say page 1. And in here, I'll put on a paragraph tag that says this is page 1. I'm then going to make a duplicate of this called, you guessed it, page 2. So make a second file called page 2. And I'll make the page title say page 2. And there'll just be a paragraph tag that says this is page 2. So now we want to make a simple header that's shared between these two pages. So I'm going to make a new PHP file. I'll call it sample header. And all I'm going to do here, I'm actually going to take out all the HTML. And in here, we'll just put in, actually, I'll just do it this way even. I'll put in 2 links. A link to page 1. It says page 1. And a link to page 2. So we've now got 3 files. Close up everything else. We've got a full page 1, a full page 2, and our header that's just a partial page. Doesn't have HTML tags on it other than the shared content. I could even maybe put this in a div tag. So now I want to include this header on both of my pages. So what line number should we put this in, and how should we do it? We want the header to appear at the top of the page. What line number do we want to put it at? Thanks, Megan. So we'll put it in the body, and you can use any of the 4 functions. I'll use include. So we'll include it. And then I'm going to put it on page 2 as well. So after the opening body tag, but before our paragraph, now go to the browser and we'll have a look at it. So now I have the world's simplest and potentially ugliest navigation bar. I click page 1. When I go to page 2, So now we have one file that contains our navigation. If I want to modify the header in some way, we can just make changes here. So I'll just put in the word sample header in all caps before my links. And this will change the header on both page 1 and page 2. So I have a super simple navigation bar. It has no styling. But I'm using include to inject that directly into the body of this page. So if we view the page source, you'll notice here this div, it just gets injected right in. So the end user, they don't know, they can't see that this is actually a separate file. So any values, any variables that I declare in my header, they're going to be available in any page that includes the header. And that'll be useful for us in a little bit. Again, here's my header. Now this, I think, is a fairly simple example, but are there any questions from anybody so far? Then Jack, just make it as a regular file. Just make a new file and you just give it a PHP extension. Okay, thanks, Roshan. Okay, it's 10 to 3. I'm going to upload my changes, this little simple example to Git. And when we come back, we're going to use this structure. We're going to build a real header where we can build out a navigation bar with Bootstrap. And then we can include it so we can start to navigate around our site. We'll build a header, we'll build a footer, we'll look at customizing it a little bit. We'll move our database connection into a shared file. We should be able to do all that in the next hour. And then our last hour of class, we're going to look at implementing some simple error handling. So we will take a 10-minute break here. I'm going to stop the recording and I will upload everything. And I'll see you back here in 10 minutes.